if you're just getting into React Native, it's something that you really want to put at the back of your mind before you go ahead and start that new project, or probably have an existing project, and you might feel that everything is getting so clustered and overwhelming. Well, this talk is for you, and I'm very sure you will pick one or two things during the talk. So do stay to the end, and I hope you enjoy it. Before I start, just a little about me. I'm Oluwatobi Shokunbi. I know that name might sound hard to pronounce, so you could just call me Toby. Everyone calls me Toby. A software engineer based in Nigeria, Abuja. I write code. I'm a YouTube instructor and a technical writer. So if you want to learn more about software development, specifically based into React Native and React, you could check my work on YouTube, and you could also check some of my works on Medium if you love to read. My handle is just1and0. I'm very sure I will come up when you search. I'm also the founder of React Native Nigeria community. So it's a community just like this one where we host meetups and conference specifically to React Native, because we believe React Native is the next big thing, and we want to be part of that force as it goes forward. So if you're all about meetups, please check out our meetup. Do attend, feel free, and I'm very sure you would learn a couple of things and also meet new people. So straight to, let's get started. So there is this thing about React Native that it's 100% easy, and the fun fact is that to a large extent it actually is, because React Native is basically using JavaScript to write React Native mobile apps. Be it in iOS, be it in Android, you're basically using JavaScript to write React, to build mobile applications. And it goes way beyond this, because in the long run, it's not just about building mobile apps. It becomes a bit of hell when your code base begins to get large. It becomes a bit of hell when a lot of things start becoming too much, because it's not like there is a predefined structure for how to write React Native, or there's a predefined structure on how to build mobile applications with React Native. You kind of draft out your own structure as you build your mobile apps, and you get to this point where you begin to notice that anything can go wrong in a matter of time, especially when you didn't take the time to actually set up a lot of things and set up your React Native project very well. You tend to notice that you have a lot of repetition of codes. You don't really understand your project anymore. Um, Things just get a whole lot confusing, and a lot of things contribute to this factor, ranging from your app getting large. And let's say your app started off as a single page application, and over the next 6 months it has exploded and become something as even as big as containing thousands of lines of code. And not having a very good structure would tell on your code in the long run, not just on you and but on other people on the team, because everything becomes very clustered, everything does become very arranged, and you wouldn't really enjoy React Native the way you are supposed to. Another thing that also might affect or be a key factor into this is the hands on the project increases. And as I said earlier, React Native doesn't really have a predefined structure. You kind of build out your own structure as you work on the project, and everyone coming to work on that application will definitely be coming with their own mentality, with their own structure, with their own ways of doing things. And if you don't take the time out to do all this structure in your own React Native application, you tend to see multiple approach being used, different structures, and it becomes something that you can't manage anymore. It becomes overwhelming. So in this talk, what I would like to be going over is a lot of notable points that you can try out in your next React Native application, or you can even use in your current application. The main point is this. The main aim is these points are things that would really improve your React Native application by a long shot. When you start to build, when you start to use these points in your React Native application, you would definitely have notable changes. And so let's get right to it and let's find out what those points are. Um, the first thing I would like to go over is everything is a config. And this makes a lot of sense because React Native works with a lot of things from images to fonts to colors to environment variables and to navigations. These are mainly most of the things you would be using on, if not 100% of most screens, but at least on at 90% of most of the screens. You would want to basically show probably an image. You will basically have to decide the font that you'll be using in most of those screens when designing your mobile applications. You would be using colors, be it on text, be it on a view, be it probably a background color. You would be using most of these things, environment variables, down to secret keys, down to whatever you might decide to use as your environment variables would be going inside there. Things like API endpoints that you would be hitting across your applications. You would basically have all this in ENVs and also navigations. So when navigating to multiple screens, you would notice that you would have different names for different screens. And if you are not careful, you might tend to use a name twice in most routes. So how does everything down from image, font, colors, ENVs, and navigation translates to everything being a config? So I'll go over that in a while now. Now, config setup. If you look at the image here, I just took a screenshot of what I felt was a config setup. And if you see what I did here, you could see that down to everything for images, for fonts, that's at the left, right hand side, far left, you will see that I have different images with different namings. So both italics, black italics, bold. You can see down to light, you can see to medium, you can see regular, you can see semi-bold, you can see semi-bold italics. So all these things translates to different fonts you'll be using across your application. And this makes sense to have everything in one place and probably call them in your application when you do font size and call probably this font config, and now call secondary and then the exact font type you would be needing. This makes a lot of sense because you have every font now in just one global place, where once you change this, you are definitely sure that images, the fonts across all pages in your app will also reflect these changes, as opposed to writing your fonts directly. And whenever whenever there's a need to change probably the fonts you'll be using in your application, it will be more stress going through each page individually and trying to manually edit all of them, as opposed to just having a config like this where you edit just this file and everything across your application will pick. The next config you can see is colors, and it takes the same mindsets in font configs, where you have your primary colors, you have your text on primary colors, you have your warning, you have your text danger, you have even down to gradients when you'll be working with things like creating gradients for your application, be it in buttons, be it in screens. You can see that everything still boils down to having a config for it. So right now, when you would want to work with colors across your applications, you would know that, okay, primary colors are probably this color code, and all across your application. Once you want to use primary, you know that it's going to be picking this correct color. Whenever a time presents itself where probably there's a UI change, or going forward, there's like a whole revamp of the whole entire application, coming here to just change your color schemas would be like a piece of cake, as opposed to going all over your applications to change just one color. This makes everything look neat. It makes it easier for anyone coming on the team to work on this project to really understand what they'll be doing going forward in the application, or things that they will be working on, instead of creating new colors. The next thing over there is image configs. I hope you can see that. but it does take the same mindset of having every asset in one folder, and just everything is going to be imported over here and exported. So when I would want to use an image, I would just be calling my images from here, and React Native would, and all across the application, I'll be able to use this particular image anywhere. And it also reduces the need for always probably importing or requiring specific assets all over your application. Right here, when someone is supposed to work on your code base and he's looking for a set asset, they'll basically just come to this file, also look at what they're looking for. If the asset they're looking for is here, they just call it and use it. If it's not, they probably would export and add it to the project, and also follow this same convention to have everything look more neat and presentable to the eye. You would notice that this approach makes things a whole lot easier and a whole lot better, because um, everything is now a config. Anyone coming to the application to read it, to use it, can basically understand what is being set and how to use it in what the particular screen probably they'll be designing, or a particular screen they'll be currently converting from UI to code. This makes everything a whole lot easier and neat. Down to navigation configs. Navigation is a little bit the same but tricky. Now you would notice that in navigation you would have different route names where that you would necessarily want to use. So say I have an application that has start, main, and auth. Where start might probably represent app logic as loaders, stored keys, and probably to know if the user has been signed in before, and probably authenticate the same user all over again. But the approach here is that I have all the name of the screens that I'll be calling in a config file, in a navigation config file, all listed this way, where I can now call them individually and use them probably when I'm calling my React navigation, when I'm calling navigate, then I just call this global config to call the set screen I need. And you can see that they are reusable, because when I even create my navigation stack using React navigation, you can see that I also called on the key level where I called navigate to.start, and it picks that as the key. And all across the app, I could just also still always use navigate to.start, and it makes everything a little bit more neat and easier to read. And if someone else is coming on the project to probably create a new screen, you'll probably also see that, okay, this screen name I'm about to use has been probably created by another developer or is already in use. So I should probably get more creative and make a new name from the screen I'm currently working on. It brings this level of neatness to your code, and very easy for anyone to really understand what is going on. So that's it for config. Moving on. One other thing you would also want to always take note of is always rebuilding reusable functional components. And this is really type of important, because funny enough, I did compare a file size of a component written in class component and one written in functional component, and it will surprise you the amount of size that you would strip off if you use functional components. It's not really big, but it's something to know that it actually influences your file size. And aside that, functional components are much so easier to read, they're easier to understand, and they're easier to reason about, easier to test. So it's just something you would want to try out, because it makes your code look more neater and easier to go about what you would want to do. Okay. One also thing that it's very important is focus on crafting out a folder structure and sticking with it. Most times when I go on a code base and try to read or try to understand the code base, I take so much time trying to understand what the folder structure is, where certain things are being kept before I even go about writing code. And it's not supposed to be so. You have to take out a chunk of your time before you even start writing any React Native, before you even start focusing on your app, to try and draft out a very good folder structure that you can work with. Most people might go with a lot of templates. Some people might already go with already preset templates created, but know that this doesn't take a lot of time to actually draft out. Tops takes 20 minutes or 10 minutes, And once you have your whole folder structure set up, it's something that will be a breeze for you, and you won't really have so much issues. For me, one of the folder structures that I kind of came out with before the talk was, everyone always kind of have this SRC folder which represents source, and your SRC folder will definitely have things like your components, where you drop components that you might want to reuse across your applications, ranging from text inputs to headers, to screen layouts, whatever it may be. You could have all those components placed in one folder. You could have asset folder, and asset folder is basically where you have things like images and fonts, like they make up the most part of your assets. And you could dump out all your images here, all your fonts here, and you could go with the same mentality of having a config and calling all those assets there, and probably exporting those files so that people can still reuse them in the screens that they'll be working on. Then you have your screen folder, your navigation folder, and your store. Now, bear in mind that this structure isn't the best per se. No structure is the best. The structure that works for you is the best. But always make it conscious. Always make it a conscious thing to always have your folder structure ready before you even start coding. You should always have your folder structure that you want to work with, and always stick with it. Don't overcreate, or don't bring in new structures as you build your app. Always have that structure laid out that works for you, and work with it. One other thing I also want to go over is the use of type checking. Now, there are a lot of alternative out there. We do have TypeScript, we do have Flow, we do have prop types from React. These are like options that you would want to really try out. I can't go over like a ton of reasons why you would want to go with TypeScript, because I tend to use TypeScript a lot. I most recently started using TypeScript, but I've been enjoying it. But you will really want to check your types. You really want to make sure that the type you are using for a certain field is exactly what it is, and it is what you are passing. And also, TypeScript also just makes things whole lot easier for you by doing some runtime checks. Say you create a component, and you create a component, and you could pass in the props for those components, and in those, when you want to reuse that component, you will basically get like an IDE warning of probably a prop is missing, or a prop hasn't been added. So it kind of shows you the error in your code before you even run the code. So it makes things a whole lot easier. I won't necessarily give you reason why one is better than the other, but what I would try to say is make sure you are checking your types in your application. It goes a long way. Another thing you would also want to do is employ to use a little bit of automation. React Native apps are so much easy to write these days that it can get really big in a little amount of time. You could be working on a very simple application, and in a matter of 2 weeks, you find out that you have this little application has turned into something so big that uh, it becomes overwhelming, and you have things from testing to, you have not just writing things to bother about aside from writing the code. You have things like testing, you have things like continuous integration, you have things like always getting the APK ready or the IPA ready for the clients to review. You have a lot of other things to go about doing aside from just writing codes. So it's very important to try to set up CI/CD in your application. You could use App Center using code. You could use code push using App Center. You could use Fastlane. This takes a whole chunk of work from you, as it allows you to now focus more writing codes, and it gives you this relaxed feel of rest of mind that your application will definitely be deployed and sent out to the people that are supposed to test it, or the developers that are supposed to test it, or the testing team. And it will also help you run your test if you write tests. Also important, you should write tests so you ensure your application does what it's meant to do. Use alias import. Using alias import is very important, especially when you're working with large teams. Having to always import modules in your application like this looks a little bit on not neat, and things can get messy quick. Say, for instance, you mistakenly, or a developer mistakenly switches a file from a folder or moves a folder to a different location in your application, you will definitely know that it will begin to break. Things will definitely start to pop up, all sorts of red screens on your mobile application. So it's very important for you to always try to use alias imports. It makes things a little bit faster, as developers would now know that, okay, there's an alias import already set up for, say, assets. So instead of always manually navigating to where the asset file is, what they will be doing is calling probably the module of the asset, and they can use it across your application. Um, One of the ways to set up alias import is a very simple plugin. It's called Babel plugin module resolver. It's very easy to set up. As you can see on my screen, you just run the npm command to install. After that, you'll be creating a babelrc folder in the root of your application, and you'll just copy this config. If you look at most important thing in this screenshot is I do have this root object. I do have this root object where I have this src listed there, and I have aliases where I now have where I want it to look for those files. So this makes everything a little bit more better, because if I need any source of assets, fonts, I won't necessarily have to always backslash and navigate manually to that folder and look for it. But with setups like this, it's going to be far more easier, because I will just have to call my SRC and it knows exactly where to look for me. We have spoke on a lot of things. I can't even believe I've spoke on this on a lot. But let's do a quick review. And one of the things we review is you should always keep at the back of your mind is always use a config. Configs are very important to what you build and what you are doing. They make your code look neat, and it's easier for anyone who's coming on that project to work on it to know exactly what to do. And it kind of gives this structure that isn't already there in your application. Write functional components more. Write functional components more because, as we said earlier, it minified the file size to a large extent. You would enjoy the benefit of functional component, and aside that, it comes with hooks. So it takes the whole stress of the whole stress that comes with class component and makes it far more swift and easier for you, and it's easier to read. Another thing we also talked about was craft out a working folder structure and stick with it. It's always very hard to get a working folder structure that works for you. Everyone is always creating theirs, everyone's always working with theirs, but try and find one that works for you and stick with it. I did show a demo of mine. Other thing is to always check for types. But whichever one you go with, whether it's Flow, whether it's prop type, or whether it's TypeScript, just find one that you are comfortable with and use it. It does help. And the last thing I also talked about was using alias imports. It's very, very important to use alias imports. We did go over how to set it up and also how it affects your project. So thank you. And any questions?
Awesome, Toby. That was excuse me. That was an awesome talk. So I have one question. Actually, we have a few questions, mainly around the controversy that is TypeScript. So we were talking in the live chat about TypeScript.
Sure.
So what was? Can you elaborate on what was your experience using TypeScript, and did you like it? Any tips around TypeScript?
Well, I will say that there is different levels to TypeScript. Everyone has to know that I did just recently start TypeScript, and it's been say 4 months in, and I won't even say I'm writing TypeScript the way it's supposed to be written. I am writing how it's supposed to be written, but I'm not even there yet at like my whole full beast mode of TypeScript. So my advice for people using TypeScript is try and use it to where you understand to, because TypeScript is basically still JavaScript, just with a little bit of sugar. So try and as much as possible to get comfortable writing TypeScript. You could start with something as simple as just always writing, always creating your types. So your interface, the types for your components. You can start with something like very simple as that, and something very simple as that, so that when you reuse components, you are sure that okay, I know the types that is needed in this component. It does go a very long way. You can start with something as very simple as that, and probably always try and build your TypeScript knowledge. Because remember, you can't know everything. There's the more you use the tool that makes it easier for you and better for you. So try from probably the most menial or minimal level you are in TypeScript and just kind of build that on that knowledge.
Yeah, so Ankit is saying that we'll use a lot of TypeScript today because his talk is on TypeScript and typing. So
Oh, sure.
uh,
I think everyone should definitely stay for his talk. He'll be talking more in depth on TypeScript then. I'm very
because
sure you.
because when I use TypeScript with third-party packages, right, we don't know whether they support them or not, and most of the time we just put in any type and just get it over with.
Yeah.
So in that case, maybe TypeScript is not that useful. But if we have a strict code base, you're using good packages that have good support, then TypeScript is very handy. So Ravi Patel is asking, do you have any tips and tricks to get started and learn React Native? We also have a few
Um,
more questions. I'll ask, yeah, one by one.
sure. Sure. Tips and tricks on React Native. I feel one of the ways to learn React Native very well is to always keep building projects. And it's not just limited to React Native. I think whichever framework you are getting into, there's just so much that tutorial videos can get you. And there's just so much that online publications can get you. They will definitely be following a their own standard, their own type of class or how they want to teach React Native. But always know that each project is different, and the more you work on projects, the more knowledge you will gain on React Native. So it might be something as simple as building a to-do app. It can be something as simple as creating a chat app. They all come with different problems. They all come with like different thought process. So always try to build project. It doesn't have to be a full blown out project. It can be something very simple. Try your hands out on it. You don't have to follow best practice. You just have to make sure, okay, this works. I'm learning something from this project. So always try as much as possible to build stuffs. And I'm very sure in a little amount of time, the knowledge you will gain from all the projects you have built to look like, whoa, I feel like I'm one expert in React in React Native over time. So yeah, my advice is definitely build stuff, man.
And another question is, how hard is it to style React Native? So Sandeep Acharya is asking this question. So how hard is it to style a native app?
Okay, so styling React Native apps for me has been very simple. It's not hard because if you already have this mentality of CSS, it shouldn't be a problem for you. You're just basically writing Flexbox. It's just like a different camel case of CSS. So it's very straightforward. It follows the same conventions of CSS, color, background color, font weight, text align, the same naming convention you are already used to if you're coming from a web background. Sorry, but it's very very easy to get into. I would suggest you probably even taking a CSS course or a Flexbox course. If you come with that knowledge to React Native, you will feel that you will even feel you are styling. You will feel you are flexing on React Native because it's really that simple.
Yeah, so also libraries like style components, they help because they come with native support, right?
Yeah,
Um, so Ashfaq Mohammed asked a question. So it was more, I think you already answered it. So he was asking how hard is it to get started with React Native. So it's pretty much, I think you already answered the question. Um, Anil is asking, um, do you know probably, do you have any idea about whether it is easy to push in updates into your app without the app, updating from the store, the app store. So
Oh,
how hard or easy is it? Have you?
okay, so it depends. It really depends on your own approach. I do always. That's why I always hammered on always automating a lot of things by introducing CI/CD. By introducing CI into your application, it makes updates very easy. If you were using Expo already even makes things so easy as it's already it can allow you build your bundle and upload it to the server, and probably the mobile app will basically be checking for the new bundle updates. Aside that, if you are using normal React Native CLI, it's also that easy. You just have to set up Fastlane or probably set up things like App Center, which also still makes life very easy. Once you set up App Center on your application, you could just upload just one build, and once you have that build approved by the store, you won't have to upload a new build anymore. You will just be uploading new bundles for your application, and every user using your application will basically be listening to App Center server to wait for to always check for a new bundle release and download that bundle when it's ready. So it's very easy as, and this I think I need to iterate because this only will download bundles because it's a JavaScript bundle. So anything that pertains to the JavaScript front end side of things, you should be aware that okay, it's going to get that update. But if you have to touch one or two things on the native side, you would have to probably always create a new APK and submit that. But most of the times in React Native, you will basically be dealing with probably changing how a screen looks like
Yeah.
or editing an endpoint. So all those type of things are very easy to do with App Center and Fastlane or with Expo. It's very straightforward.
So yeah, Ankit is also adding to the same thing. He's saying check out Code Push from Microsoft,
Yeah,
and
and it's
they
free.
yeah they it's like for JavaScript you don't even need to have a release cycle. That's
Yeah,
going
you
to
know.
yeah
Yeah, Apple had to even update their website to handle because of all this whole new JavaScript bundle upload. So they had to update their policy to okay, this is approved. So Apple actually supports people uploading JavaScript bundles for the application and updating their apps that way. So you should know that it's very safe. It's it's very easy to set up. It's very safe, and you would basically enjoy that in your application setup.
awesome.
Yeah.
So I'll just take one other question. So yeah, Anil is asking, is React Native bridging gone?
Um, no,
Hmm.
not yet, but probably in the future, I guess it will be done. There's a whole lot of restructuring in the whole React Native architecture. So we're gradually getting there. We are not there yet. There has been massive improvements in the overall structure in React Native 17
Hmm.
as it now loads up faster. You get a whole lot of performance upgrade with Hemis for Android and a whole lot of things that have basically come to React Native that makes your app even feel more close to native.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not yet gone, but there is a massive improvement to it.
I'm sorry, I had one question, last question. Sorry. So Apple released Swift UI, right? So I tried building an app with Swift. I don't do native much, but I tried building an app with Swift. But quickly, I ran into many blocks because for some reason I was not able to set up native with Swift UI as easily as I thought it would be. And there were a lot of articles. So there were a lot of articles saying that you can do it both ways. You can write Swift in React Native, you can write React Native in Swift, and
Wow.
uh, yeah. So it's like yeah. I mean, a lot of explosions happened in my mind, but I couldn't. So I decided just to do it Swift UI. But what was you? Do you have any experience in that? Any personal experience in that regard?
Currently, I really don't.
Okay.
I actually haven't. I did look at Swift UI, I think sometime last month.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I kind of like liked the whole vibe that was coming from it. But I haven't
Yeah.
actually like to really check it out. I might I so I'll probably not be the right person to give a very good
Yeah.
response to this question. But yeah, I will check it out, man. Just hearing that I can run React Native, Swift in React Native now is actually even blowing my own mind, my own mind.
Yes. So people are doing all sorts of things. So
Yeah.
yeah. So me and Sandeep we are building an app. So we can talk about it later. So the
Of
next
course.
talk is by Ankit. So one second. Yes. So first of all, thank you, Toby. That was an amazing talk, and thanks for taking so many questions and answering them.
No, it's
The next
fine.
talk will be by Ankit, and he's going to talk about TypeScript, solving I18N for React apps, which is internalization, and then how we can learn TypeScript on the side. So let's get started, and I'm going to stop the session and restart Ankit's session shortly.
Bye, guys.
Please stick around, Toby. So after this talk, people will be able to ask you questions in the lounge. So I'm sorry, I forgot to add this. Everyone who is watching this as audience, you can always ask questions in the live chat, and there is also a lounge that we'll take a short break after the next talk, where you can sit with people in virtual lounges. So there, each speaker will take a table, and you can sit with your the speaker that you want to talk with, and you can just have a discussion with them. So the discussion will be just contained to that table, whichever table you join. So please keep that in mind and just keep asking questions and encourage our speakers. With that, I'm going to start Ankit's session. I'm pretty sure he's ready. So let's get started. Thank you, Toby.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Yeah, it's saying please wait for a few seconds. Yep, you're good to go. All you.
Okay. Hi everyone. I think my screen is visible or I am visible. Okay, good. How do I share my screen? Okay, just sharing my screen. One second. Okay, hi everyone. I hope everybody can see me. I'm Ankit Meni and I work as a front-end engineer in Flipkart. And today we'll be talking about how to solve internationalization, like adding support for multiple languages in your app. And we'll also learn a bit about TypeScript and how you can use TypeScript to your advantage. And we will write very less code. We will try and write as less code as possible to achieve that thing. And let's see the deck. So this is my introduction, and this is my ID across all social media, whether it's GitHub, Twitter, Instagram, or anything. You can find me here. And yeah, so let's imagine that you're building an app, and it is the coolest and greatest ever, right? And yeah, this is literally the coolest and greatest app ever. And it's going great. You are doing amazing. You are not writing any test. You are just adding features, and the app is hit. And you have transformed from a startup to a big company. But until your PM said that we need to talk, and since our app is doing great, we need to capture more market areas and going deeper into regions. And what that means is that you need to add language support to your app. So if your app is working just in English, you might need to add certain regional languages. If you want to go international, you want to add international languages like Spanish, Portuguese, or anything, right? So you thought easy peasy, right? And you would do what you always do. You would just go and just Google it. And I always add best for any query because why not? You should always use the best things. And the moment you type this, you see that there are about 340,000 results in 0.39 seconds. And now you are drowning in documentation, you are drowning in blog posts, medium articles, libraries, and your own code and your deadlines. But when you go through those libraries, there's so much that they are doing, but your use case is very simple. You just want to add certain text for different languages, and you don't need to understand their internal architecture. You don't want to change your project in a big way, and you just want to do it as you are growing. So let's see how what does it take to roll one of your one of your own internationalization frameworks. But before we do that, we would need to see what we need to keep track of. So if you see from a standpoint of a framework or a library, there are just two things that you need to keep track of: the selected language. Let's say the current selected language. Let's say I'm on English, so the English would be my current selected language, and the correct message for that language. And if I've chosen Hindi, so the language, the ID or the message would change because of the language. So let's say, how would you do it? So let's say this is your app entry point, and you're not doing here. I'm not showing the complete app. This is just the entry point of your app, and you are just rendering children. So let's say you want to keep track of the language. So what you would do is, at the top of your app, you could define a state. I'm not saying that you would do it this way, but we are just seeing how will we progress to something that we can use and which is also scalable. So what you can do is you can just use a use state. So this is how you define state in React, and you can give it an argument. Let's say I want to default set my language to English, and then there are these two things that use state gives you. Use state comes from React. I have forgotten to import it, but it's all right. So you get language, and then you can change this language by doing set language, right? So but if you see your entire component sitemap, so this is your app which knows about your language, and then this app has three subroutes: home, about, blah, and then it has again three subroutes, and there are so many children, and you only know that the language of the app is here, but there can be so many messages and strings here which you need to change as well. So what you would do, you would pass from your app to every different component the current selected language. I mean, this was so much work that while even creating this image, I slept. And imagine doing it actually on your code. So there's a name for this phenomena, and it's called prop drilling. And you can see that we are drilling. So we are drilling this language prop into every component. And if you forgot somewhere, you would not be able to do that in this child 2. So if you need to render some message correctly at child 2, all of this needs to be passed at every single level. But thankfully, we will not do prop drilling today. There's no point in doing this. So how can you get around this convenience that you have something defined in your app at the top level and you need it in every single component? What if we change this control? So instead of sending down everything, what if your app could, so this is your component, this can be a child level component. What if this could actually figure out or actually ask or look up the correct string or the current language that it wants to use? So what we are doing here is that this solution that we will talk today is not specific to React Native, but I demo that in React Native because it's a React Native meetup, but you can take the same concept and apply it to a React or any other project. And this will work mostly for React because this is on certain tenets and concepts on which React is built on. So what this text span or div would do is it can ask at the runtime that give me the correct translation for, let's say, coolest. Coolest is the ID. So how can we do that? So once I say a global store, which means that it is available to all components, and once I say global store, what thing does come to your mind? I'm looking at the chat right now. Redux MobX, 100% correct Redux. But if you are hanging around on Twitter and internet, you would know that people bash a lot about Redux, and there are some people that hate Redux, but actually I love Redux, and they do that because they say that there's so much ceremony there, and they don't want to write that much code. So whatever solution that we'll discuss here can also be done with Redux, but today we'll not do Redux, and we will use everybody's favorite. And I think somebody has also, okay, somebody has set context. A lot of people have set context. Very good. So I knew what is everybody's favorite, and I did a lot of research. So we will use context, and we will not just use context, and there's a name for this pattern which is called provider pattern. And now, since I always lead with examples, I would also want to list in front of you the earliest known. If you go to the history of context, you will see the earliest documented example of context. If everybody can see my screen, what is this? Can somebody? There is a hint already here. I'm not able to listen anybody. Okay, Redux. Yes. So every library that you use probably uses provider pattern. So how Redux uses is, I will not go into the details of it. It stores this your actual Redux store in a provider, and then you can use that connect function. So this is how your Redux provider pattern works. But we will not uh, delve into Redux, but I just wanted to bring in front of you like what is provider. So in provider, what you do is you wrap your entire app with a provider component, and from that provider can give you certain values because its name is provider. It can provide you certain values which you can query from any component which is deep in your tree. So, okay, we have our to-do list ready. So we have two things to do. We have to write a provider to wrap the app, and a convenience component to render strings and text, right? Which will query. So this second component will actually query from the provider the things that the provider is giving, which is called the context. And this convenient component would query from the context whatever it needs. We'll see. We'll see as it comes. Okay, so let's write some code. Is everybody feeling energetic, excited? Or they have already slept? Okay, okay, cool. So people are still with me. Okay, so we will start very simple. So this is, I think this is the longest thing. The name is just the longest here, but it does nothing. What it does is just renders your children. So we are not writing actual provider here. We are just setting placeholders, so that we are just setting the bridge so that things would work as soon as we add in this. So the simplest provider can be, it can just render your children. It doesn't use context right now. It's just a simple component called provider, right? So and what do provider do? So this was the implementation of provider. It renders children, but you have to use this provider for it to be usable. So what will we do? So let's say this was your entire app. What I'll do is I'll wrap my app with this internationalization provider. Cool, simple. And now we come to the difficult part. So now we need to add stuff to internationalization provider, which will help us translate those strings at runtime, correct? Or at build time. I mean, there's a small distinction there. What is happening at runtime, what is happening at build time, and by the end of the slide, we would be able to answer those questions. So now we have to add this stuff to internationalization provider. Let's say, and I think there are two things that we would need: change language, because at any component you can just say I want to change my language from English to Hindi, or from Chinese, or Russian, or whatever. And then there's this translate, that what is the correct translation of this word. So let's say you want to show cool is there, and at any point of time you want to answer that, given my current language, which this internationalization provider would be keeping track of. We are hoping that it would keep track of, and it would give us the correct translation. We would just say translate this word. And before we do this, before we go and implementing, we would also try and talk about how will you store your translation. So generally people store these translation in JSON files, or because this will be an API response also. You can get, so let's say you want to change your language on the fly, you can get from your server like what are the correct strings. So let's say hi is hi, coolest is coolest, and greatest is greatest. And if you want to change this language, so see, your keys are not changing. Your keys hi, coolest, and greatest would be constant, but just the actual translation of it or the value of it would change. So it's like key value. Your key always remains the same, but your value gets changed based on the language that you have selected. So EN means English. So let's say this is an English.json file. And we have Hindi.json also. So hi is namaste, coolest, sabse acha, and greatest is mahantam. So if you see that since these keys are not changing, so it should work. Theoretically, it should work. So let's see how we can use this in our provider. So in our provider, if you saw earlier, we just had this. We were not doing anything. We were just rendering plain children. So so now what we are doing is we are just importing these different languages messages. So I'm assuming, since this is a demo, I'm importing both of these languages together. But what I'm assuming is people who want to implement this, they would just have one, let's say, base language imported as part of their code, and not everything else, because this would increase your bundle size, and for every new message change, you would have to do a deployment. So we'll come to that later in the question answer part. We can decide strategies on where do we store strings, how do we retrieve it, and all that. But for simplicity, let's assume that you need here, right? So you have English strings also, you have Hindi strings also. There is a small type of languages that you can have only two, En and Hindi. So if somebody would try and give gibberish ABC, this language's type would fail. So this is the TypeScript. Next, what we do is we want to create that context. So in our provider function, what we would do is we would want this translate function which would give us the correct language. So this create context is just a function. We have not set a context with this now. So what does this do is it is keeping a small map of translations, and translations is a key value pair. So for each language it is containing the strings. So now English strings also, if you saw, English strings is also a key value pair. So if you see here, this is also key value. So this is the translation files. And what we are doing here is for each language, we are storing this translation files, right? And then there's a translate function. And what you would call the translate function. So let's say you want to get the correct translation of hi. So what you would do is you would just say translate and you would just pass hi, which is a string. And what it would do is it would go, and since the language is already specified here, it would go to the, so let's say language is English, it would go here in the translations object. It will select this En language, and inside this, it would just give the value of the string hi. So this is how simple it is to make it work. And so this is our actual context. So what we need to do is we need to add some ceremony. So React has this API called react.createContext, and you would need to do this, otherwise it will not refresh on any time the context changes. This would just be a plain JavaScript value. So once we have this context defined, what we have to do is this is a syntax of React, that you have to wrap your children with context.provider, so that in your children you can only query values which are provided in this value, right? So as we see here, create context is an object. So it gives us two values, language and translate. We probably might not want to use language, but we will always use translate. Correct? So our provider is set, and it looks great, but how do you use this? So we earlier talked that we have two things to do. We have to create a provider, which is partially done, and then we have to write a convenience component to render strings. So you can define in the same file for convenience that this is your simple component. What it does is it also takes that ID, because that is the ID that we want to translate. So let's say hi, I want to translate the ID hi message in English as well as Hindi form. So what I'm doing here is this use context is also provided from React, so that you can read that context. And since we know that our context has an object in its memory, so it looks like translate and language. So we don't need language now. We just want to translate that whatever ID that I'm passing here as props, you just translate that ID. And how do you use this? So anywhere you don't need to now know about any provider. At any component, you can just, instead of text, you can just do translation text and ID coolest. And let's just see how it works. So this is, let's say, coolest. And if you see an app here, there is nothing going on in here. This is a standard boilerplate of React that I've just copied. And this is the internationalization file. There is less than 30 lines of code, and there are some white spaces. So this is what we just saw in the slides, that this create context will return two things. And this is how you would create. And at the bottom of this is our convenient component translation text, which I'm using in app. So in app, if you see, I think everybody is able to see. Can people? Okay, cool. People are able to see. So if you change here, and this string is here. So if I change greatest, it should change to greatest. And what we'll do is, just to change the language, instead of giving programmatic controls, I'll just do Hindi here, and it should just work, right? So you are not specifying what is here, and it is taking at runtime, or whatever language is set, it is actually calculating this for you. And I think this is working. Wow. And I always praise my own code because nobody else does. Okay, so but you think this is too good to be true, right? Life is not this easy. And What I mean by this is you will never have such a simple use case that will just get converted, right? So what else can you get? So recently, there was a big sale in Flipkart. I hope everybody would have bought something. And if you see the message, so this is a screenshot from Flipkart app. And if you see here, there is bank offer 10% off on HSBC credit cards up to 1500 on orders of 5000 and above. Now, what do you think? Will these messages be hard coded, or will they be coming from an API, or will they be stored in UI? No, right? These are just templates, and we are just filling these values. So these messages, so 10% can be a variable. This card can be a variable. This HSBC can be Kotak or anything, right? These are variables. So these are called interpolations. So let's say your template looks like this. Hi, name. So name is a variable, which is, I have shown that in curly braces so that you understand that this is not normal text. This is a variable, and this is a string that is coming to you. This is a message. And so similarly, discount is also only valid for you, valid till this hour. So if you see that there are three variables in play, and if you replace these three values, you will get the actual message. Correct. So we would need to support this, because we can't ignore this use case. This is too big to ignore. So how can we solve that? So before solving anything, I just want to show you how your message would look like. So everything would remain the same. So instead of these plain static messages, now we have certain dynamic interpolations to do. So what this means is that when this discount, so let's say this discount ID, when you would use to render, you should pass name and discount, which would be replaced in this string. Cool, simple enough. And so this was our simple translate function. What it was doing was, it was just taking the ID and it was not replacing anything. But now we will have to do little more work to replace those values. So what we'll do is, we will just find out whether that message actually has some interpolations or not. So we'll use a simple regex to check whether they are separated by curly braces or not. And if there are interpolations, then for each interpolation, what we'll do is, we will just extract that variable name. And since, if you see here, these are the attributes that user would pass. So let's say if that interpolation contains name, so what I would do is, I would just replace that interpolation with the value of the name variable that the user has passed. And if it becomes a little I think I'll have, okay. So just to show you an example, I hope my screen is visible and console is big enough. So let's say what I'm doing here is, this is the string. And if you apply this regex that is applied here on this line, which I showed you above, what it'll do is, it will give you an array of these interpolations. So now this is called as an interpolation. And what we are doing here is, since this name curly braces, there's some simple logic which is slicing off those two curly braces. So you just get the name variable, and then the name would exactly match what the user would pass. And this is how you would use it. So if I want to use discount, what I'll have to do is, I'll have to pass name and the values which it could be replaced with. Okay, I'll just show you very quickly. So if I already have this code in, okay, I don't have this. Okay, I have to unselect. Okay, so this is the code that I was talking about, that we have done interpolations. And if you check app.js, there's a discount. So if I change this, hi is nobody's name, John Doe. So if you see, it gets changed here. And I've added some simple buttons also for you to see that you can just change language and it just works and not faking it. Okay, so since this works, let's get this out of the way and proceed further. Are people getting this? Okay, cool. Okay, I can see a lot of thumbs up. Cool. So this is the base, and there's some fun surprise which is coming your way. So don't just sleep off yet. And I hope everybody's getting my jokes. Okay. So so it works, but TS integration sucks, right? And Toby also said that you should use TS, and everybody says that you should use TS because it makes you uh, less errors. You can catch your errors at dev time. So there's no type safety. I can give any ID. There is no IntelliSense autocomplete. Nobody hints me that what are the interpolations. So unless until I go and look at these messages. So let's say I want to use this discount ID, correct? And since I've stored all of these IDs in my folder messages, and since this discount and name, unless until I go and see this file, I would not know that I have to pass name and discount. And what I can still do is, instead of discount, since my English sucks, and I can just wrongly spell it. And what happens is, if you see, since this is undefined, and if you have a really long message, you might, since this is undefined, you can have a logic there which would just omit this, and you would not even know whether this message is correct or not. So there's nobody telling us that you are doing correct, you are doing wrong, and it is just up to individual devs, which we do not want, right? And I think that's why everybody has come to this talk. So but how can TS work though? So if you see that we are working on these strings which are defined in JSON file, they are not in some TypeScript file that you can just create structures for it. There's no mapping available, and so the bottom line is very difficult. So there's one. So before preparing this talk yesterday, I googled search that how do you do type safety in internationalization, and I saw some blog post which said that you can put all your messages in a TS file, which did not seem very correct to me. I mean, just because we want to make it easy for us, we are breaking the entire flexibility that if it is JSON, you can get it via API, or you can do anything, right? You can get it from a serverless function, you can store it somewhere, and it's just a JSON variable. And most of the times, devs do not write these translations. There's someone from copywriting team, or someone from ops, or someone else does it, right? So they would not be handily very handy with TS files. So let's say if things magically work, right? What do we need actually to make those things magically work? So first thing is we need to do type safety on ID. So what do I mean by ID is, so let's say this is coolest, right? So, and since this is a TSX file, what if I say ABC? So there's nothing stopping me here. And if you see, like, nothing would get printed here, so this message has gone empty, so nothing is telling me. So first and foremost, what we want to do is we want to restrict the IDs that you can send to this component. So how can we do this? So I have added a link here, and so this link is of a playground. So what you can do is, if you have a type of a union type which just had high, coolest, greatest, and discount, what you can do is you can have this keys, and you can attach this keys to the prop. So you would be forced to, so the user would be forced to write any of these, and if you do not write any of these, then you would probably get an error. But then defining these types manually is such a big task, and nobody will do it. So what can we do? So since we have a JSON file, what we can do is we can always create a generate types file here, right? I mean, you can create a Node.js file, and what it'll do is you can programmatically read this JSON. And what I'm doing here is I'm calling this base English file as a base, that this is the base that we will always include. And what I'm doing here is I've just, so since this is a JSON object, this is an object, I can always get object.keys. So if I were to console.log all keys, right, what would I get? So I will just execute this command, and if you can see that I'm getting this. And what I actually need is, from this TypeScript, I just need to define type keys of this. This should be in a union fashion, right? So what I can do here is I can create a variable. Let's say my type. And since this contains everything, what I can do here is I can use, I can just do export type all keys equals to. And now here's the fun part. Since you have everything already, what we want to do is we just want to, So since this is an array, all keys is an array, you have seen that array. What I want to do is I just want to join them by union. But before joining, I need to code them so that they become strings. So let's say this is the key that is coming. And what I'll do here is I will quote this key, just surround it with comma. And since this has become my new array, and I just want to join it by this. And if I now console.log my type base.map, okay, all keys.map. So if you see that you have this all keys, high, coolest, and greatest. So now what can we do here is you can always write fs dot, you can write this file, and let's say path dot resolve. I will resolve to a file name which I've already created. So if you see that there's this types file which is empty, so types.ts, this we can write our values in this. So what we'll do is we'll just write directory name, source, and let's say types.ts, right? And if you now run this file, no types file, okay, I have to also pass what needs to be written. Sorry, I always get overexcited. So if you now see types has this thing, right? And in your internationalization route, you can, so you have this component, a translation text, and you see that ID is string now. So instead of that, we can make it all keys, and all keys would be imported from the types folder we just created. And since ID is all keys, that's it. And if you go now to your apps component, you can see that FDF is not assignable to type all keys. And if you see, you will get an awesome autocomplete, and it solves one of your problem. So if you see how easy it was to do something like this, like you can always define programmatically your types, and this can always be generated. Okay, did everybody get this? Okay, Gauri is my friend. Yes, written wow. Cool, Gauri. Stay tuned. We'll see some more fun things. So going back to our slides, so we have, so now ID is safe, but interpolation still is, I don't know whether this discount. So there is no mapping. I don't know when I'm using this, let's say hi, whether I need to pass certain attributes or not, right? But since we have added interpolations, if I don't add, so this hi does not need any attributes, but since the way TypeScript works, since attributes are defined, I have to give those empty attributes to make TypeScript work, which is, and when TypeScript attributes are important, I still do not know. I can still make an error here, and TypeScript would not cry, right? And so this is done. So interpolation TypeScript, I mean, we need some kind of mapping, right? So if you see our file here, messages.js, sorry, JSON. So for all these three, we do not need any interpolation. We only need attributes for discount. So if there was a way that if high, then you don't need any attributes. If coolest, you don't need any attributes. And if greatest, you don't need any attributes. But if discount, you need name and discount. Any ideas? How can we do this in TypeScript? Any ideas? Guys, this is a fun session. Can people speak Bhargav here?
Yeah, I have no idea. So, maybe
Okay.
you can again do the same regex thing and figure out if the string contains.
Okay, so regex will work in JavaScript, but we are in TypeScript land. Okay, so what we will do is, so let's say these are our keys. Okay, and we somehow we need a magic function, magic utility, which would tell us that for high you do not need anything, but for discount you need those two things. Correct? These name and discount. So let's say we declared something. So this is how. So let's say a magic. You can use this magic type, and you can pass anything to it, right? And what we can check is there's a syntax called conditional types. I'm not sure what it is called, but you can check if this extends. So instead of if corresponds to extends, and what I can say is that if my t extends, so whatever you pass in here, magic inside this argument, whatever, if that extends high, so you can use a ternary operator and then you can say never, because I don't need anything, correct? And so for high, I don't need anything. If t extends coolest, do we need something? We don't, right? And if t extends greatest, okay, my typing is really slow. We still don't need anything, but if it is discount, right? If t extends discount, then you need, then what do you need? So you need name. So let's say you name and just any, and discount any, right? And if nothing matches, say never. And I have just made a mistake. This never need not be quoted. Never is a type in TypeScript that nothing will go in never. So that means that this should never happen. So now we have written this type, but we don't know whether it works or not. So let's test this out. And please work. And what we'll do here is, let's say we'll use magic, and we will put in high. So what should be the value of this please work? So it's never, right? It works. And let's say I again do coolest, value is never. But the real test is, if I give it discount, will this work? So now you see it exactly tells you that name and discount need to be there. So we can handle that relationship of what messages goes with what using this. But this again, you cannot type manually, right? Nobody can do it, right? So I think we can use the same, I think did everybody was mind blown with this? Some logic engine. Okay, I think I'm the only one who got mind blown. Okay, so what we can do here is, this is the same thing that what I was doing. So instead of magic, I'll call it as get translation. This would go inside that generate types, and we will go over each key, and we will see whether there are any occurrences or not. And we know how to find occurrences using these curly brace regex that I've come up with after 5 days. And if there's no, so what we'll do is extends never. So what I was doing here, that if there are no occurrences, you just say never. And if there are any variables, what you would say is you map all of this together, you create that as an object, and then you say that this extends this. And finally, you say never, because that's how ternary operators work. So if we do this, it's cool. So let's see that as a demo. I think I should have get checkout. So all of this code is available, and I think if you see this, this is generated, and you can see here. So what we can do here is all keys. We have just not used it. It's just that it has been created, this get translation type. Now how can we use it? So we can use it here in a manner that, now we cannot give this all keys, right? Because everything now depends upon the key of it is used. So let's make this a normal function. And in just a minute, we will see how can we use this. And so React component is just a function. You can, and defining generics is little easier here. So what I can do here is I can do T, and I would define this T extends all keys. So what I want to do here is that your ID has to be one among this all keys, correct? So what I'll do here is ID. So instead of defining it inline here, I'll just define props t, which extends all keys. Oops. Which extends all keys. And now what we want to do here is if this t, so we will use this get translation type that we created here, and we still have to run that node command because it would not have generated. So now if you see types, it is now automatically generated for us. So whatever strings were there in this mapping is generated for us, and we can just use this here now. And so what I want to do here is if the result of this extends never, right, what we want to do is we want to make this attributes optional as well, because this ID is sorted. Right now we want to type this attributes. So if this extends never, that means that you don't need any interpolation. So what we can do here is we will just say that you just need an ID. You send us the ID, which is t. Otherwise what you do is so ID is necessary in both the cases, correct? ID is necessary in both the cases. But with this, what we'll do here is that we want to specify attributes also. And the type of the attributes will be the same thing that we got. So we are first evaluating it, whether we actually need it or not, so that we can make this attribute optional. So now, 1 second, we can just props t. So now if you see that this attribute, it is throwing some error that this attribute, because attribute is not able to figure it out that whether attributes will be there or not, because in one of the cases attributes is there, in the other it is not there. So it should have figured out that this is optional. So what we'll do here is we will just keep it here and we'll make it optional, and we will give it never. And then there is this translate, I think translate internal function. We have not changed anything. So here it needs string. It can be undefined as well. Right. So this is about it. And if you go to now your app.js, right, now you see that there are no errors. And we already saw that. Okay, it has stopped working. So this is the translation. Okay, you have to export it. So if you now see that this works, right, coolest. And if I do coolest, it says that attributes should not have been here. There is this expected property is not defined here. But as soon as you change it to discount, it says that, okay, we have defined string there, so we can just typecast it to string. But if I remove this name here, just see what it'll say. So it will exactly tell you that name is missing. So now you don't even have to look at your messages file, and it will just work amazing for you. Okay, did people get this? Okay. So now you have a way. Okay, somebody said 50-50. I will write a detailed blog post for this so that you can understand this, and I think this would be recorded. And what we've done here is the crazy part. So we have not done anything. It's just that we have figured out this get translation, which will give you dynamically what needs to be the value of the attributes. And what we are checking here is we want to make this attributes also conditional, that we don't want people to pass in attributes even when there is nothing to pass. So what we are doing here is that if the value of this is never, because we output never from here, correct? If you see, the value of this would be never if there is nothing required. So what we are just checking here is that if it is never, then you just pass ID, and this would be never, and it is optional. But if it gives you something, I don't know what it gives. If it is not never, what you do is you again pass the ID, and then the attributes becomes mandatory, and the value is whatever is we have decided. So this is just a small wrapper, and in like 2-3 lines of code, you have gotten type safety, which I don't think is, you will find it on internet. I mean, I searched it, but you would not. So I mean, it just works. So you have I can go on praising this, but I think I'm running out of time. Am I running? Okay, it's 43 minutes. I'm really sorry. So let's just quickly see. So you can take it to another level. What you can do it, you can run it on watch as well. So instead of manually typing this, you can run it on watch. And so this is a simple node watch script. I share the code repository. What you can do here is, let's say, okay, I'll show it later. So you can watch this en.json, and as soon as that en.json would change, we will execute this generate type script, and it would automatically continue to populate this types.type. So even if you added something, it would get added here. And as soon as you add anything here, you can just use it in your app.js seamlessly. So these are the links. There's one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Since now you have made the mastery over here, right? In using these ternary types and generating this, you can simplify this a bit further by, let's say, get reset. I'll just take 2 minutes. I'll just show you the answer. Get checkout. So instead of that, what you could have done is, since we are just maintaining a mapping, we can just, so this is not properly formatted. So what you can do here is you can just have a object mapping. So interface is the equivalent of object in TypeScript. What you can do here is, for high, it is never, for coolest, it is never, and for discount, it is this, right? And in your types, so this is your types. You don't have that ternary nested condition. And in your internationalization, what you can do here is, you can just use this key map of t. So whatever you are passing, so this is, so how do you get a value of an object? You get, so let's say you have an object here, where object equals to something. And if you want to get the value of it, what do? You do object.key, correct? If that key is present. So since FDF is not present, it will not give you. So similarly, this key map, if you see here, this key map is an object. And what we are trying to do here is, instead of doing our magic ternary thing, which I just showed you, to teach you that you might possibly hit that case that this object will not solve your condition. So that is one good thing to know. And that is what the initial topic was, that learning TypeScript on the site. So I hope you learned one thing. But this is another thing which is even simpler. So so you have this object, and this is the key. So this key extends all of those keys, and this is the thing that we defined here. And instead of using that ternary, you can just replace it with keymap.t. Then the correct value of that key would become the object. And if you see all keys, if you notice here, we used to have this all keys here, right? In types.ts, but it's no longer here. So how can you delete this? So if you go and see what we have intelligently done here, is all keys is now just key of type. So if you see all keys, so key of is an operator that you can use on an interface or an object kind of type, wherein it just works as object.key. So it will unify all your keys and give you the thing that you want. So we have eliminated most of it, and this is the final version. And if you see, this file is not even 100 lines of code, and you get such awesome things by default. And yeah, that's just it. So you have the code link here, and the deck is also shared here. I'll share this on Twitter, or I'll ask Bhargav, and I'll put this into the chat link.
Yeah, you can also, the chat link works fine. You can also share on Twitter.
Okay. I think I'm done, guys.
Awesome.
So I'm really sorry.
No. This was very good. So we still have half an hour left, and let's take some questions. So everyone, if you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll just start taking questions one by one. We have quite a few. So I'll just take a couple of questions, and then we'll just take a short break where people can ask you questions in the launch. So one question is from Ravi, and he's asking, how do you handle singular and plurals in I-89?
So this particular presentation did not handle that. So what you can do is, since we have this translate function, right, and you have this interpolation, so you can use this because this is extendable. So what I've done here is I've just replaced that. So pluralization and formatting, currency formatter still needs to be handled in this. But I think that would be very simple, that you can always do. I mean, you can make the word itself as a parameter, s or not s, and you can just specify that based on the variable that you have. So that still needs to be handled. I just wanted to show you what things were not available on Google and in existing frameworks. So if you wanted to do that, how will you do it?
So also adding different types like numbers, float, etc. That would that be an issue with
That would not be an issue, because what I'm actually looking for is, I'm not looking for the type safety or of individual values that are passed in. I just want to make sure that the values, your attributes, are passed correctly. So if you see here what in our types, so you can do that here as well, but I've just made it as string so that it becomes easy for me, because finally you will just see a string, but we can also have here number, because if you want to do formatting, you would take that as a number. Like otherwise you would have to do a runtime check, and like whether this is type of number or instance of number, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, internationalization is a very big topic. I just took a subset of it and
awesome. Also, the signature looks similar to i18 Next, which I use personally, and I loved using i18 Next because
okay,
they were probably the first framework to even come up with custom hooks. They did it
okay,
immediately. So the moment hooks were launched, they came up with custom hooks right away. So it helped us when we were building it for our company. Uh,
okay.
I totally loved it. So everyone, if you have any more questions, then you can just head to the lounge. I'm going to end this session here, but in the lounge, Ankit and Toby and Mirza also, Shad Mirza, who's our next speaker, they'll also be seated at the lounge where you can just sit with them and ask questions. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay.
How do we go to launch?
Yes. So I'm going to end the session, and then you should be able to see go to lounge button in the nav bar. So it should be at the top.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey everyone. Our next talk will be by Shad Mirza. He sent us a recording of his talk because he's having some internet issues. So Shad Mirza is a full stack developer from Hashnode. He's pretty popular on Twitter, and his talk is about floating head animations with React Native. So I'm going to play the video that he sent to us beforehand. So let's get started. There we go.
Hello everyone, I am Shad, and today we are going to build React Native animation using animated library. We will build something like Facebook Messenger, those floating heads. To show you a demo, this is what we are going to build. So a little bit about me. I am a developer at Hashnode. I like writing technical articles. You can find my blogs on iamshadmirza.com. On my free time, I like to do pencil sketches, and I'm a huge fan of tea. Also, you can find me at iamshadmirza everywhere on internet. So, this animation will contain 4 steps. So the first step will be to set up the boilerplate. We will just render a container and a heads. Then we will render heads and add a nice round style to it. Then third step will be to set up time responder. We will record gestures and move our heads accordingly. Then the fourth step will be to decouple the complete logic into a custom hook. So let's start. So as you can see, this is just a boilerplate, some imports and normal just a container view, which has a property of justify content and align items. So this will make sure our head remains at the center of the screen when we start. That's it. Second step will be to render the heads. So we are going to use 4 heads. We will use the same image, but we will use four heads to create that trailing effect. Okay, and each head will have its own animated property which will contain its position, so that we can animate each of them separately. And then the next step will be to add styles. So we are just going to add a simple round styles to head. And one thing you can notice is this is position absolute. Why position absolute? Because we want all four heads to stack on top of each other. So there will be one head, then on top of it the second one, then third one, then fourth one. So it will look like there is only one head, but as soon as we start dragging, the bottom heads will appear like it's spreading it. Okay. Now the next step will be to render the heads. Actually, what we are going to do, we are going to take the heads array, create a shallow copy, and then apply a reverse function. Why reverse function? Because React Native works in a fashion that it will render the first head on the screen, then on top of it the second, then the third, then the fourth. So the fourth head will appear on the top. We want the first one to appear on the top, so we are just going to apply the reverse function. This will make sure our fourth head will render first, then second, then third, then second, then first. Okay, and now we are just applying a simple array.map function which will return animated images. It contains the styles of head. This is just going to provide a round style. Then there is transform property. This will make sure that we are animating the position accordingly. You will see how in a minute. Next step is to set up the pan responder. So we are going to use the useRef hook here. Why? Because useRef will make sure that the instance of this pan responder exists throughout the lifecycle of this component. As you can imagine, that use state is triggering the re-render, might trigger the re-render, and we don't want to create a new instance of this pan responder. So we are going to use useRef here. Then we are going to create a pan responder, and there are 4 callbacks we are going to talk about. So let's talk about the first two first. The first and second callback are just set pan responder callback. You can consider it like asking for permission. When we return true here, it will tell the pan responder to allow recording the gesture on that particular component. That's it. We are more concerned about the third and fourth callback. So the third callback is on pan responder grant, and the fourth is on pan responder move. So the on pan responder grant callbacks gets invoked as soon as you touch the component, and this is a perfect place to reset the styles or provide some initial styles to the component. We will use this to set the initial styles later. The fourth one is on pan responder move. So this gets invoked as soon as you start dragging it. See, we touched it. So on pan responder grant gets activated, and as soon as you start moving, on pan responder move will trigger and give us the gesture state, which will contain the difference of position, like how much we move. If we are moving upside, this will be dy, the difference in y direction. If we are moving horizontal, this will be dx, difference in x direction. So we will use these dx and dy and update the position of our head to move over the screen. How? Let's see. So first thing is on pan responder grant, we are taking the heads array and applying an extract offset and setting its xy position to 0, 0. What this is doing it, suppose we start dragging our head here and it reaches this position, this upward position, and we want the next animation to start from this new position, not from the 0, 0. So we are extracting this offset so that our new position starts from here, and now the next position will start from the bottom, not from the center. So these two lines are just taking care of that. So that's it. And the fourth callback is on responder move. So this is the fun part. As you can imagine, we are going to drag the first head, the topmost head only, not the other 3. So the logic is drag the first head and the next 3 head will follow its position. Okay. So the first head, we are taking the first head from the heads array, and then we are setting its position to the difference we calculated from gesture state. X position will be the x difference dx, and y position will be the y difference dy. So that's it. And as you can see, we are just going to use the dx and dy, so it's better to destructure here. We took the dx and dy from this state and applied it directly. Perfect. Now the next thing is, we took care of the first head. Now the next thing is applying the animation to the second, third and fourth head so that it trails this topmost head. So we are going to take a slice of heads, and this will make sure we are taking the second, third and fourth head. We are going to apply map to animation, and then an sequence, animated dot sequence. Okay, so this can take an array, it can take multiple animations. So the first animation will be, look, if you look closely here, there is a delay in animation, and then they are following that position. Okay, so the first animation here will be to add a delay. We are taking the index and multiplying it by 10 milliseconds. So the second head will be 10 millisecond delay, the third will be 20, second will be, okay, the second will be 10, then 20, then 30 milliseconds array delay. And then we will use animated.spring function to set its position to the difference so that it will look like it's following the first head. That's it. Now let's take the pan responder and apply it to the topmost head. We just want to capture the gesture on the top head, not all of them. So we are checking if an index is items.length. This will make sure that the last item we have rendered takes the pan responder, and others will take just an empty object. And then we will apply, spread the pan handlers. Okay, that's it about the whole logic, and this will make sure that our heads are moving like messenger. Now the next step is to decouple the logic into a hook. So for decoupling the logic, we will ask ourselves one question, that what are the properties that this component depends on. So this component depends on two things. One is pan responder and the second is heads. So we will take the dependent logic and move it inside a custom hook. I removed all the code and created a new file, use pan responder, that will take an image URL and give us the heads array and pan responder, so that we can just do the same thing here. And this logic is completely unchanged. We have just removed all the code from this one single line. Okay, so now what's happening is use pan responder. Use pan responder is just a simple hook. It's just a function, use pan responder, which is taking an image URL and returning an array. Okay, so first add the heads here, and then add the pan responder here, and then return this both things from here. That's it, nothing difficult. Well done, we have successfully decoupled the whole logic into a custom hook, and now you can use this hook anywhere you want. You won't have to rewrite the whole logic, and this makes our code a lot cleaner too. So you have already seen here. If you want, you can go to expo.io/imshadmirza/floating heads and see the whole code. This is the use pan responder, and this is the function without hook, and this app.js contains the function with hook. See, that's it. So yeah, that's about it. You can connect with me on I am Shad Mirza on Twitter, and I have provided the links for code demo and slides here, and let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, so I think
awesome talk, man. No problem. This is very good. So everyone, so do you have any questions? You can let me know, or you can ask Shad directly. He's available to answer them. But first, let me ask one question. So, yeah, as someone who hasn't used React Native much, can you talk a bit about the animated, the object that we have been using so much
Yeah,
here?
so animated library is built by React Native team. So they have a couple of functions which takes a value to mutate, and then you pass the new value and it will take care of the animation. Like suppose you want to change some opacity from 0 to 1, so you send a value 0, and then
Mhm.
you tell them with two value property that we want to change this property to 1, and then you pass the duration in that about 3 millisecond or 4 millisecond, and it will take care of that.
Also, it probably has does like animation functions like springs, tweens,
Yeah,
etc.
yes. So they have
Okay.
animation and timing function, and there are a bunch of them actually. You can visit the start reactnative.dev website to
Okay.
get a look on all of them.
Awesome, awesome. So probably this library is probably an inspiration for Framer Motion, because I've used Framer Motion and they have a very similar syntax, sort of usage-wise. So you specify
Yeah.
the start point and end point, and then you specify duration, etc., and everything else is taken care of. So
Yes.
Anil is asking a question, and he's asking, how is the performance in React Native? Is it comparable to native apps, animation-wise, I guess?
Okay, so animation wise, I think animated library suffers from one problem, that it runs from on the JavaScript thread. So if you are running some heavy operations, then the performance might suffer. So there is another library called Reanimated. So that
Hmm.
solves this problem by declaring the animation instead of like calling them right on the JavaScript. So you declare the animation and the whole logic moves to the native side. That gave us a perfect animation of 60 frames per second. So
I see.
the animation we are currently dealing with, it's fine, but if it's get complicated and you are also running some heavy operations like taking the controls from user and fetching some APIs, so that might get spooky, and there comes a reanimated library, which I think Ankit have also talked about on the Twitter.
Okay.
So I think I can prepare a talk on reanimated too also.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So React Native, I think he said something about React Native reanimated 2, I think.
Yes,
So
reanimated too. That's I think not launched yet,
okay, okay, okay,
but
awesome,
it's amazing. Amazing.
nice. So I think that's all the questions that we have. Anyone, if you have any questions, now is the time. We still have about 4 minutes. Um, but yeah, this has been amazing. I think getting Toby, who is in Nigeria, he woke up at 4 a.m. for us to attend the session. Um, it was awesome to see him up very early in the morning. And generally, meetups are generally conducted late in the probably in the afternoon or evening. But generally, what happens is React Native or React Bangalore is also on the Saturday that we conduct our meetup. So I don't want to clash with them. So that's why we had to go with mornings. But yeah, he woke up at 4 a.m. for us. Quite amazing.
Huge
So
respect.
yeah, so I met him for the first time in I think in Geeky Ants meetup, React Native Bangalore. So I met him there, and I immediately thought we should get him to talk for us. So Ankit, Shad, and Toby, thank you so much for taking your time to talk with us. This was amazing, and we hope we'll get more talks from you. And I think that's a wrap for us. Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much, everyone. Please join our Discord server. Let me just get the link. 1 second. There we go. Yes, please join our Discord server and also our meetup. So the meetup link, you can probably find it from our Twitter handle. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a nice day. And I'll see you again. Bye bye.